Hello, I'm Sarah Coates and this is Global Eye, your window to the world straight from Tel Aviv. Now, we're going to be travelling around the globe for the next hour together to give you every story you need to know. Well, on tonight's show, will British leader Boris Johnson be forced out? Well, seems like the party is well and truly over for the fun-loving Prime Minister. We'll go live to London. The Novak Djokovic saga seems like it's far from over, with the mess down under dividing the global sporting world. We'll go live to a Tongan Olympian who's spearheading a disaster relief campaign after that massive volcanic eruption on Saturday, with shockwaves felt right around the world. But before we get into any of that, let's start right here in Israel. What's the buzz? These are today's most trending stories. Well, the Omicron variant of COVID continues to run rampant across Israel, with more than 50,000 cases recorded over the weekend, as a number of members of the Knesset have been forced into isolation after contracting the virus. But it's not all bad news. Health experts are saying that the reproduction rate of the virus continues to trend down, with authorities calling on those who can work from home to do so, as COVID tests continue to be in short supply here in the Holy Land. Well, Israel continues to be soaked by torrential rain, causing flooding in many cities and towns, with residents in the neighbourhood of Lod in the centre of the country completely cut off, with thousands of residents needing to be rescued. People are being seen ditching their cars and using kayaks to get around, while many vehicles remain stranded on highways as floodwaters rise around them. And don't put your umbrellas away just yet, with rain expected for the next few days. Well, Israel's been part of another military drill with the US Military Central Command, with F-16 fighter jets and Gulfstream G550 planes flying alongside American pilots from the 55th Fighter Squadron's F-16s against the IAF's so-called Red Squadron. Well, the exercise simulating airstrikes and mid-air dogfights a year after Israel became part of the Middle East CENTCOM alliance. Lebanon is dismissing reports of a secret deal to get Israeli gas, calling the claims completely untrue. Now, the country's energy ministry denying a report by Israel's Channel 12 News that Israel signed an agreement to indirectly pump natural gas to Lebanon to aid the crisis-hit nation. Well, the Energy Office confirming, however, that a gas supply agreement is being worked on between the Lebanese and Egyptian governments. And for more, let's bring in Professor Uzi Rabi, who is a director of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle East Studies. Professor, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Firstly, the big question, deal or no deal? What's going on here?
Well, I mean, it would be almost natural for Lebanon to deny these reports. But as we know, actually, there had been kind of contacts regarding sort of economic transfer of gas and some other stuff beneath the radar between Israel and states like Lebanon. I think that in the end of the way, this would be something that would show Lebanese and others that there is some other routes to be exploited other than Iran. And let me remind you that talks about the maritime border between Israel and Lebanon were actually held for some time in order to create kind of a much more, let's say, a flow of gas between two countries. But if I am looking at these, stories, I think that there is a Jordanian element here. I mean, we have to note that the gas is going actually to be delivered through Jordan and Syria. And this is the main point here. Jordan, which is becoming pretty proactive in recent weeks, is asking itself and the United States to what extent Syria can and should be normalized. And this is very, very imperative for Jordan's economy, as we are doing with a lot of stuff that goes on between these states. And when it comes to trade, refugees, and some other questions that are rising to the occasion. This is what I would call new regionalism, where states are actually, I would say, are after their own particular interests, economy, the stuff of the 21st century, energy, viruses. This is something that makes states in the Middle East to rethink about things. And this is just one indication of how policy or ground policy can be bypassed by economic, let us say, ventures.
Yeah, and, you know, Professor, as we know, Lebanon is absolutely reeling, struggling through this shocking economic situation. If there is a deal in place, just how far would it really go to sort of lift or help Lebanon out of this shocking crisis it's in?
Well, this could be actually portrayed as a trial balloon. But I tend to think that Lebanese are so desperate that once they see that there is a chance actually to revive, such ideas and such routes, economic support, they are going actually to, to rise to that occasion. And this is something that has to do with kind of, in my opinion, rethinking of some of the main themes of the Middle East. Nowadays, it is becoming kind of a different story, and I do see that everywhere. By the way, United Arab Emirates, far away though, but is very, very active in this, I would say, move. And at times, the United Arab Emirates is actually providing a lot of financial support for such ventures and initiatives. And in my opinion, this is a very positive step. Just one step at a time, we should take it. But this is a very good and fresh beginning. We'll have to wait and see actually how things are going to be played out in this regard.
Yeah, for sure. And Professor, as you mentioned, the people there are desperate. These people, they're only getting, if any, electricity a couple of hours a day. Food is scarce and, prices are skyrocketing. Tell me, how likely would it be that Lebanon could potentially put its pride before its people if it didn't accept a deal that was on the table?
Well, I think that this is not only a pride, this is kind of some politics, and it goes against the stream to say that actually Lebanon is running a deal with Israel. But as I said before, we know that actually we do talk to Lebanese people. There are very, very desperate. As I said before, look at what's going on in the north of the country, where there is a Sunni community nearby the port of Beirut, when you have the Maronite and the Christians. Listen, people are looking for, are eager to have kind of a change. Of course, this is a lot of misery, because this state is being captivated by Iran and Hezbollah, and it is well known. I think that such ideas and such a creativity, when it comes to the economy, gas, energy and stuff, in my opinion, this is kind of a very, very good try. And this is just right in time, actually, to come up with such initiatives. It is too, we are just in the beginning of such moves. But I think that with the passage of time, you're going to see more and more of that.
Okay.
As people, as I said before, very desperate to happen.
They are. And Professor, just very, very briefly, we're about to go off for a commercial break. If a deal is brokered, how much would this hurt Iran?
Well, Iran actually is very dominant in Lebanon, but this is the main thing. What Israel and others would like to show Russia and everybody, that Iran is the culprit behind the events in both Lebanon and Syria. And basically, this is also kind of a move in that regard.
All right, so I'm sure we'll hear something in the next few days and weeks. Professor Uzi Rabi, always a pleasure.
Definitely.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, we're going out for a short break, but when we come back, we'll take you live to Texas the day after 4 hostages were freed after being taken hostage inside a synagogue. All of that and plenty more. Don't go anywhere.
when the news cycle never stops. Zoom in, past the sound bites and beyond the numbers. Zoom in, between the people and into the Middle East conflict. Together, we'll take a deeper dive into the history and the relationships that are driving today's conversations. I'm Jeff Smith. Together, we'll zoom in Sunday through Thursday nights, only on I-24 News.
Imagine being able to see into the future.
What innovations will change the world as we know it? Join us as we meet the people changing our planet and discover the inventions shaping tomorrow.
Israel Business Beat, Sundays and Wednesdays, 9:30 p.m. GMT.
Welcome back. Well, major demonstrations in Tunisia with hundreds of people taking to the street in the capital on Friday, marking the 11th anniversary of the uprising that unseated the former president, defying COVID restrictions, rejecting what they say is President Kais Saied's monopoly of power. Police responding with tear gas and water cannons to disperse protesters who are demanding the right to decide their country's future, with Saied assuming executive power and exerting moves to rewrite the constitution. Now, it's one of the most crucial shipping routes in the world which descended into chaos last year when a massive container ship ran aground, but now the Suez Canal is having a major makeover, with construction well underway to expand it, with the Egyptian authorities that control the maritime passage saying that the project should be finished by July next year. The southern end of the canal, where the Ever Given was stuck for almost a week, is being widened, while a second lane is being extended to make way for more ships. Moving now to Syria, where heartbreaking images are coming in of displaced people trying to sell trash in order to survive. Here's more.
On the outskirts of the northern city of Raqqa, displaced Syrians desperately searching for something to sell, repurpose, or eat.
I collect iron and plastic and send my children to collect scraps so that we can sell for potatoes, tomatoes, and bread. Our condition is very, very bad.
Their working ground is a huge landfill located in the former Syrian capital of the Islamic State group. Across the road, an oil pump echoes the contrast of the resource-rich region controlled by US-backed Kurdish forces. Nearly 10 years of war devastated Syria's economy, leaving the Syrian pound at an all-time low.
The situation for people in Syria remains grim. Humanitarian needs have grown, funding has shrunk. The economy continues its downward trajectory. Food costs more now than at any time since the World Food Programme started monitoring such costs in 2013.
According to the UN, Syria is setting new records in food insecurity numbers. Some 12.4 million people, almost 60% of the population, are now food insecure and do not know where their next meal will come from. This is a 57% increase since 2019 and the highest number ever recorded in the history of Syria. The price of a basket of staple foods has more than doubled since last year and is now beyond the reach of millions of families.
Look at the condition of our children. Look at our lives. Can you accept this way of living for your children?
In between the mountains of trash, there are still dangerous reminders of the latest battles.
We find needles. We also found 2 bombs and bullets a few days ago. A bomb exploded. Thank God it exploded far. There are lots of things. There is glass, but we have to work to live. A few days ago, we found 2 landmines, until 2 people working with us came and told me they were bombs. We called the patrol and they took it.
When a tractor tows in new rubbish, workers rush to find the best pickings, hoping what they will find will be enough to get them to the next shipment of trash.
And we're moving on to the United States. These are today's most trending stories. Now, are you someone who's ordered a parcel and it still hasn't arrived? Well, there's a fairly good chance it could be here on the railway tracks in East Los Angeles, with the area targeted by thieves who've been hitting up trains with their sticky little fingers. Well, you can see thousands upon thousands of littered packages well short of their intended destinations, with the rail network saying it's seen a 160% increase in theft since December 2020. Is there a doctor on the plane? That was a call out over a Qatar Airways intercom after a woman went into labour thousands of miles high. Well, passengers and crews scrambling to help the mother, a migrant worker travelling home from Saudi Arabia, where there was thankfully a number of medical staff on the plane to assist her in delivering this healthy baby girl, with doctors describing it as a miracle birth. Moving on, and Jewish leaders are hitting back at claims that Saturday's hostage situation inside a Texas synagogue wasn't motivated by anti-Semitism. Well, reports are now coming in that the deceased offender who was shot dead, who took a rabbi and 3 others hostage, was a British citizen, with the incident live streamed as part of the synagogue service, with loud gunfire and explosions heard just before the hostages were freed unharmed. Well, the hostage taker was demanding the release of a Pakistani neuroscientist who's currently serving an 86-year prison term in the US, convicted of trying to kill US military personnel in Afghanistan. And joining us now from Texas is Dr. Mike Evans, who is a founder and CEO of the Friends of Zion Museum in Jerusalem. Thank you so very much, Doctor, for coming on to chat to us. Look, I understand that you live next door to this synagogue. Tell us what you heard.
Well, we heard explosions. We heard gunfire. It was unbelievable here in a tiny little Jewish community. I mean, only 1.6% of the population of Texans are Jewish. And by the way, what did they say? The FBI, Biden's FBI, that it wasn't related to the Jewish community. It wasn't anti-Semitic. How dumb can you be and still breathe? This is the reason why Jews get killed. Cancel culture in a synagogue on the Shabbat. And this is what they get. This is what they get. It's outrageous.
Yeah, it is extremely concerning, to say the very least. And Doctor, look, tell me, in your opinion, just how much worse could this have been? As we know, he took 4 people, but, let's say this was a Jewish holiday.
Well, he could have picked, he could have picked a bigger synagogue, but let me make a statement here. I was mentored by the founder of Mossad, Israel. He said this: you kill a fly and rejoice. We kill 1 and 1,000 come to the funeral. When a terrorist can become infamous like this, and when a culture will give him an exemption and say, oh, it wasn't related to the Jewish community, it wasn't anti-Semitism, it will spread the Ebola virus of terrorism. It's despicable. It's an insult to every Jew that has died by the hands of an anti-Semite.
So what do you have to say? What is your personal message for these people who have not condemned it as anti-Semitism?
Well, they need to repent. Number one, social media. Listen, I had 42 million followers, mostly in Muslim countries, taken down off of Facebook because they said, oh, they couldn't possibly be following you because you're pro-Israel. Excuse me, we recruited them. We've got to get these media organizations to stop the insanity because media can spread terror. By the way, it was the German media that caused the death of 6 million Jews with their lies. The same thing in the pogroms with the Russians. So the media has to stop this insanity, this cancel culture. Telling a rabbi, a very tolerant rabbi, this rabbi who was so compassionate, so understanding. Oh, it wasn't a attack on your synagogue, and it wasn't anti-Semitism, it wasn't Jewish community. You're giving terrorism an exemption. You're empowering them. It's despicable. Demons don't clear customs. When you do this, you're basically saying to the would-bes, stand in line. You've got a great opportunity.
So, Dr. Evans, given that we continue to see these atrocities take place, after given what you've just said to me, tell me, in your opinion, how can Jewish communities be better protected?
Well, I think that, number one, the world community, listen, I've got 77 million followers. The world community has to define the terms of the debate. Jews get killed for being Jews. It's always been that way through history. Not over land. They kill them because they're Jews. And we've got to scream about media terror. When a would-be nut job can go in and do what he did, and he can become an infamous star in the world of jihadists, and then a government can give him an exemption, oh, well, it wasn't anti-Semitic. It wasn't the Jewish community. We have to shout out and call them out on this, because this is the fuel that feeds anti-Semitism. I've dedicated my life to combating. By the way, I'm a victim of it. My own father strangled me at 11 and left me for dead when I tried to defend my Jewish mother.
Yeah, well, look, Dr. Evans, we really, really appreciate you coming on this evening, and let's hope these people that were taken hostage are being cared for now in an appropriate manner. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. All right, let's move on now. And a major storm system is eyeing the East Coast this three-day holiday weekend. States of emergency have already been declared in Georgia, Virginia and the Carolinas as officials and residents prepare for snow, sleet and ice. John Lornick reports.
Winter weather alerts are issued from the lower Mississippi Valley to the northern mid-Atlantic through Monday.
It's definitely not a real good commute snow. It's wet, it's warm yet, so it's wet and sticky. And yeah, it's hard to peel off the roads.
This winter blast pounded the middle of the U.S. earlier this week.
Out in the open spaces out there, everything drifts over, so it's real hard to be able to get through.
Portions of North Dakota were hit hard, with some areas seeing a foot of snow. State officials along the East Coast say crews are already preparing the roadways.
The materials they have to work with are over 500,000 gallons of salt brine, 60,000 tons of salt, and another 250,000 gallons of other de-icers that we can use when the ice gets really thick.
They're also reminding commuters to be extra cautious while behind the wheel.
A lot of wrecks consist of a regular vehicle stopping too quick in front of a semi.
As some people are making the most of the snowy conditions, others are bracing for frigid conditions and potential power outages.
We have a generator, and, we're a strong advocate for that, too, because, we do get a lot of unusual weather here, and you have to be prepared for that.
I'm John Lawrence reporting.
Well, there's been a happy ending to a rescue situation in Seattle, where a dog that was thought to be lost in a landslide was found safe and well. Jeremy Roth has today's Take a Look at This.
A tense and emotional rescue unfolded in Seattle after a landslide partially collapsed a home, leaving a dog trapped inside for 6 days. Following the collapse, the dog was missing and presumed dead, until days later, someone heard a whimper from inside the home.
We got a little cry this morning.
Firefighters began searching, cutting through walls, while the owners waited anxiously outside. Then, hours into the search, came the news.
Got her? You get her? Yeah.
The black lab named Sammy was pulled from the home and brought down for an emotional reunion, thanks to a vigilant family that never lost hope and the brave responders who pulled off the rescue.
Just the kind of news we want to hear. All right, well, after the break, can British leader Boris Johnson survive the firestorm that's spreading following revelations he held a number of parties during COVID restrictions and on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral? Certainly not looking good. We'll take you live to London for the very latest right after this. Don't go anywhere.
By midnight tonight, thieves will have stolen 2,400 vehicles across the U.S. today. So when you buy your next car, ask your dealer for Recover. With Recover, you'll always be able to find a forgotten parking spot or know if your car gets towed or moved without your permission. And most importantly, you'll be able to easily share your car's location with police so they can recover it for you. Stay in control and protect what's yours. Ask your dealer for Recover today.
Breaking news again, but there's always more to the story, especially here in the Middle East.
What's really going on in the region? Well, unless you're actually here, you can't really tell.
Join us here at the beating heart of the new Middle East
to get a true perspective on what's really going on. Welcome to the I-24 News Desk.
Now more details on a developing story.
Breaking news at this hour.
It is history in the making.
When news breaks in the Middle East and around the world, our team of experienced journalists are here, around the clock.
To keep you up to date with the news of the day.
Where it happens, when it happens.
Stay tuned and stay informed.
Every day on the hour.
The heart of the new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
It's a living, breathing organism that pulsates through millennia. Touch it, listen to it, smell it, taste it. Experience the Holy Land like never before. Holy Land Uncovered, every Sunday, only on I-24 News.
The I-24 News team of talented correspondents are working hard for you. They're in the markets, on the streets, in the battlefields, getting the pulse of the story. Tune in for Beyond the Headlines to see how the top stories of the week are affecting real people. No commentary, no debate, just the best stories presented by our best journalists.
This week, in Mallard at Large, my guest will be Manuel Valls, the former French Prime Minister who was a key player of the French international policy for many years.
I met Vladimir Putin a few times. Not as much as president, naturally, but I'm convinced that it's the power dynamics that count with him. If there's a slight sign of weakness, he takes advantage of it.
Mallard at Large with Christian Mallard, this week on I-24 News.
Staying with us here on Global Eye. Well, he cut royal ties back in 2020 after marrying his wife Meghan, but It turns out Prince Harry still wants benefits associated with being a part of the British monarchy, challenging a government decision that doesn't give him police protection. Well, his legal team says he doesn't have the necessary protection he needs while visiting Britain, adding, in the absence of such protection, Prince Harry and his family are unable to return home. Well, Meghan and Harry have based themselves in the US, where they continue to draw condemnation from supporters of the royal family for explosive TV interviews many see as a major embarrassment to the Queen. Now, one of the world's most loved fashion designers has died, with news in that Italian great Nino Cerruti has died in hospital after complications following hip surgery. Well, tributes are flowing in for the 91-year-old who revolutionised fashion, with Giorgio Armani addressing his passing, saying, "I've always considered him one of the people who've had a real and positive influence on my life." Well, Cerruti ventured into the production of clothing in the late 1950s with some guidance from his grandfather, who owned a textile mill. Well, a major payday is on the way for a treasure hunter in the UK, with a metal detectorist finding one of England's first gold coins, one of only 8 which are known to exist, uncovering it in Devon. Now, the coin, which experts say shows the first true portrait of an English king upon his throne since the time of William the Conqueror, could make the lucky man more than $500,000, which is pretty amazing given that the finder hadn't been out with his detector for more than 10 years. Pressure continues to mount on British Prime Minister Boris Johnson amid calls for him to step down after revelations of parties being held at 10 Downing Street during COVID lockdowns, with the gatherings also happening the night before Prince Philip's funeral. Now, Johnson is facing public humiliation, apologising to the Queen, while fellow MPs are continuing to turn against him, with an investigation also launched into the parties and those who attended. Let's have a look at Boris being absolutely grilled in Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months. I know the anguish that they have been through, unable to mourn their relatives, unable to live their lives as they want, or to do the things they love. And I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead when they think that in Downing Street itself, the rules are not being properly followed by the people who make the rules.
After months of deceit and deception, the pathetic spectacle of a man who's run out of road. His defence that he didn't realise he was at a party. It is so ridiculous that it's actually offensive to the British public.
He's not apologised, Mr. Speaker, for breaking the rules and breaking the law. He's sorry because he's been caught.
When the whole country was locked down, he was hosting boozy parties in Downing Street.
So when my constituents were making unimaginable decisions, he was hosting a boozy party in Downing Street.
Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
He cannot, and he must resign.
Ooh, what a grilling. Bojo looking very crestfallen there. And for more on this story, let's bring in royal commentator and biographer Angela Levin. She joins us live from London. Angela, lovely to see you. Look, firstly, we know Boris has gone and apologised to the Queen, but tell me, really, how much effect do you see this as having on the situation?
Well, it's difficult to know. And as Boris is saying, and everybody is saying, we have to wait until there's been an investigation. But actually, the party that came the night before Prince Philip's funeral, which is absolutely appalling, he wasn't there. He was in Chequers, which is the Prime Minister's country home, and he goes to most weekends. But I think it signifies what's going on at number 10, where they aren't actually understanding the importance of their roles and what's going on around them. I think it's very humiliating he had to do that. But he is a naughty boy. There's a large part of him that's a naughty boy, and he doesn't, people love him for that. And also he's been very good with the pandemic and getting us out of the EU. But he has these lapses of not behaving very well. I mean, when he first became Prime Minister and went to visit the Queen, because once the election happens, he goes and the Queen sort of says, yes, it's okay. She said to him, I don't know why anyone would want the job, because it was very hard in June 2019, just before the pandemic. And he told everybody about this, in a joke. And he got an absolute whacking telling off, because those meetings are absolutely confidential and he's not supposed to tell anyone. So you see there's a sort of black hole there somewhere. But a lot of people still want him. I mean, he got 80 people ahead of the opposition in the last election.
Yeah.
So it's a mix-up of him.
Yeah, he's a very, very naughty boy. Tell me, Angela, what do you see as coming next?
Well, I think that it will calm down a bit. I mean, the Labour Party, the opposition, is going full steam ahead, hoping that he'll resign and nobody will get the job and there'll be an election and they'll win. I think the chances of them winning is very low because they're in a terrible mess as well. But I think that he will do his best to pull out of the hat very good things for the country and sort out difficulties that have been hanging on that people haven't done much about because of the pandemic. Lots of things stopped, and there's a lot of things that the British people want, including some sort of control on the cost of gas and electricity, which is shooting sky high, and VAT on things that they don't want. And I think if he probably turns a trick or two on that, then all will be forgiven and he'll carry on. I don't think in the end that he will leave, because I believe there's only 6 Conservative MPs who've been sent in a letter demanding his resignation. But the BBC and Sky and the Labour Party are all jumping up and down, going mad, and tell him he's got to go. He's very strong-minded, very, very determined man.
And tell me, Angela, what does this say about the Tories? We've really seen them, a long line of them, sort of drop off.
The parties?
Yes.
What did you say? The parties?
What does this say about the party?
Well, I think it's shocking because it seems that every Friday at the end of what they say is a very busy week, which is understandable, they got a load of drink in and started drinking it. Well, there was obviously more than than there should be. I think for him to say at another party that he didn't realise it was a party because it was just in the garden outside the offices is absolute nonsense. I mean, anybody would see that people are sitting at tables. They did look rather smart, but that was the end of the working day probably. But they were sitting at tables and drinking wine and having cheese. And nobody could say that wasn't a party. That's not a conference.
For sure, of course it's a party. And if they can have a party, we should be able to have a party too, right?
Well, that's it. I mean, I think that's what a lot of people have written in is desperate about the fact that they didn't see their mother who died, that they didn't see a friend, that they were ill.
You're totally right there, Angela. It's been a very, very tough time for all of us. All right, thank you very much for coming on to chat to us this evening. Have a lovely night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Pleasure. All right, short break, but when we come back, Djokovic is on a plane out of Australia after being kicked out down under. We'll take you live to Sydney after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Esta semana en News 24 y le contarás a tus hijos a 7 años de la muerte de Alberto Nisman. Testimonios exclusivos sobre el asesinato del fiscal que investigaba el atentado a la AMIA. Big Bang político en Israel, Netanyahu a punto de llegar a un acuerdo en sus juicios por corrupción. Tributo a Santana. Fernando Knopf y su conjunto Latin Power interpretan los más grandes éxitos del legendario guitarrista Carlos Santana. News 24, el magazine semanal en español de i24 News.
Strictly Security, your weekly look into security, intelligence, and strategic affairs. Our team brings the latest on the major international conflicts, analysis of the major security issues right here in the Middle East and around the globe. Join us for a close look at innovative military technology and get up to speed with what's happening in cyberspace. Saturdays, only on i24 News.
The heart of the new Middle East beats on i24 News.
Welcome back. Well, a major food crisis is unfolding in Sri Lanka as prices soar, made worse by a foreign exchange crunch brought on by the COVID pandemic. Long lines like these are being seen right around the country, with milk powder scarce, with the price of milk tea, which is widely consumed across the country, doubling. Now, bread is expected to be the next basic item to face a shortage due to a lack of wheat flour on the market, with analysts saying food prices have gone up by a whopping 17% already this year. Well, the 2022 Winter Olympics are now just weeks away, with inspectors from the International Olympic Committee, seen here, checking venues in China's capital, Beijing, and also in neighbouring Hebei province. Well, officials say from the IOC saying that remarkable progress has been made in the construction and integration of stadiums and facilities for the event, with many commercial flights into the country cancelled, with China applying a so-called circuit breaker rule to deal with the spread of COVID. Moving on, and Novak Djokovic is now on his way home after being booted out of Australia ahead of its tennis Grand Slam, where the 34-year-old was set to defend his title. Well, the saga, which involved a false travel declaration and Novak's unvaccinated status, is dividing the sporting world after judges reject a challenge by his legal team, Australia cancelling his visa on health and good order grounds. Well, the world number one says he's extremely disappointed, but accepts the ruling, releasing a statement saying, "I'm uncomfortable that the focus of the past weeks has been on me, and I hope that we can all now focus on the game and tournament I love." Well, in another huge setback for the Serbian star, he may be barred from entering Australia for the next 3 years. Well, let's go now to Fox Sports journalist Christy Doran, who joins us live from Sydney. Good to see you, Christy. Look, what a fiasco that's been playing out down under for the last week or so. Tell me, how are people there now reacting?
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for having me on. Well, it's interesting. You look around, it's early on Monday morning, you look at the newspapers across the country, the Herald Sun, which of course is the home of the Melbourne Open there. Look at the Daily Telegraph in Sydney and the Australian newspaper at large, and it's front page news. And it's leading all the radio bulletins. Novak Djokovic is finally out. He's finally lost a point and he's not come back. It's extraordinary, and it has dominated the news landscape and people's discussions for the best part of 2 weeks, ever since he was detained late on the January the 5th. So it is just an interesting, intriguing twist to start the year. Novak Djokovic obviously wants the tennis world to move on, or at least he's saying that anyway. But look, it's a big name that's gone from this Australian Open because in an Australian landscape which has 4 or 5 sports which all wrestle for coverage, the loss of Novak Djokovic is a significant one. When you don't have Roger Federer down here either, it's an opportunity for someone to stand up. The question is, will anyone actually know who's playing?
Yeah, how come this really shake up the draw now? Have we got anyone there to really sort of keep our eye on?
Oh, well, there's the regulars, there's 3 or 4. There's Rafa Nadal, who's obviously won the Australian Open before. And it's interesting because Nadal, Djokovic, Roger Federer are all locked on 20. So what a golden opportunity to start the year off. Look, it's hard to know because of the interesting build-ups. Usually there's 3 or 4 major tournaments here, from Adelaide to Sydney, in Brisbane as well. So without the lack of the usual regular build-up, we're going in quite unsighted for the first time in some years, really, because of the various bubbles that have had to be played. People are trying to reduce their travel because the spectre of COVID is very much real. We know that Nick Kyrgios, one of Australia's great hopes, just got there the other day, and he'll be hoping to be fit and to be able to go deep into this tournament because he's a crowd favourite here.
Yeah, but Christy, you know what I really want to know? It seems quite bizarre to me that Australia can, cancel this visa, saying it is a public health risk. But this comes at a time when Australia is seeing unprecedented COVID case numbers, tens upon tens of thousands of them per day. And this is a guy, as we know, who is followed around with some of the best doctors in the world. So how can the government really justify this?
It's a great question. How can they justify it? Well, they justify it by saying that he poses the threat because he will encourage the small percentage in Australia of those that might not take up the vaccination. We know that there were protests in Australia, particularly in Melbourne and Sydney. The streets were flooded, and in some cases there were thousands and thousands of people. But that has really died off in recent weeks and recent months, particularly as there has been a loosening of laws. Melbourne, of course, had 150 days of lockdown, of hard lockdown. Of all the Australian cities, they copped it the worst. This really comes down to politics here. The Australian government seeking a second term. People will go to, and of course voting is compulsory in Australia. People will go to the voting boxes come probably May, and Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, is under severe pressure. But the one thing that the coalition government has always been strong on is border policy, whether that's stopping the boats from refugees or those seeking asylum, or indeed in the most recent years, stopping the borders. You can't even actually go from New South Wales to Western Australia at the moment because Western Australia, one of the 5 states, has blocked itself off to the rest of Australia. So it's quite extraordinary. So looking from afar, you can probably understand this is extraordinary because there are 100,000 cases of COVID a day, 20-odd lives that are being lost. But on the whole, those that are older, which is obviously the trend across the world.
Yeah, wild times to say the very least, Christian. What a shame that Djokovic won't get to sort of give that crack at breaking the 20 Grand Slam titles there. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Have a good one. All right, let's now go back to the Winter Olympics, and China is on high alert with its first local outbreak of Omicron detected ahead of the Games. Well, rigid COVID laws have slowly given way to a more relaxed approach, but China remains extremely cautious, with authorities continuing to enforce a zero COVID strategy. Well, CNN's David Culver reports.
Cities across China are back in wartime mode, scrambling to identify and isolate cases of COVID-19. Recent outbreaks have some 20 million people under strict lockdowns, confined to their homes. Officials are conducting multiple rounds of mass testing and shuttling tens of thousands of residents to centralized quarantine. State media showing these makeshift encampments built within days.
It is all eerily reminiscent to the start of the COVID crisis. But now, authorities know what they're looking for, and they're tracking those of us living here through our cell phones. To go into most places, you have to scan, and they can flag us should we come into contact with a confirmed case.
China is proud of its zero COVID approach. That is, one case is one too many. In the months that followed the initial outbreak in Wuhan, it seemed to work, though brutal at times.
This strategy has indeed been effective, until very recently.
This latest surge is most concerning and perhaps embarrassing given its timing. We are 3 weeks from the start of the Winter Olympics. Beijing hoped this, the second pandemic Olympics, would be a chance to showcase its success over COVID.
The games are in part why the capital city is so heavily protected, a fortress with many restrictions to get in and out. At one point, the biggest concern was cases brought in by arriving athletes, Olympic personnel, and media from around the world. It's for that reason they have created a closed-off system, which will include the area that we're in right now. No physical contact between those coming in and those of us already here in Beijing.
But the virus is now spreading outside the Olympic bubble. And images like these are surfacing on Chinese social media. People packing in to get tested in nearby Tianjin. Some quarantined residents complaining about food shortages. 2 hospitals in Xi'an were ordered shut for 3 months by municipal health authorities after hospital employees were accused of putting COVID protocols above basic health care. In one case, refusing to admit a man who later died of a heart attack. In another, a woman, 8 months pregnant, initially turned away because she did not have a valid COVID test. She later suffered a miscarriage.
Just ask any ordinary Chinese, right? Asking about the necessity of that zero COVID strategy. I think the public support to that strategy remains.
State media showing a far more orderly public response to the strict containment measures. Most here trusting the policies. In Zhangzhou, this woman's awkward lockdown experience going viral. She's posted videos on social media explaining how a blind date that was supposed to last just a few hours suddenly stretched several days when new confirmed cases forced everyone in the neighborhood into a snap lockdown, both trapped in his home. She told local media, because we don't really know each other, it's really awkward. All he does is cook, clean, work. He doesn't talk much. In the 3 weeks until the start of the Winter Games, China might still prove effective in containing the virus, returning to a COVID-free country, at least officially. But for how long? David Culver, CNN, Beijing.
Moving on, and these devastating images are coming out of Tonga, which is reeling in the wake of a huge volcanic eruption and subsequent tsunami, causing significant damage to the Pacific island. Well, the volcanic blast being felt right around the world, so powerful even heard in Alaska, with many still missing. Well, let's go now to Tonga's first Olympian, Peter Tafatuofa, who joins us now live from Brisbane. Peter, lovely to see you. Look, firstly, I'm very sorry that this has happened to your homeland. Walk us through it. I can only begin to imagine how difficult it must be.
Yeah, I was actually, I was out fishing. I've still got my, I just noticed I've still got my fishing rod here when I heard the news. And then just seeing the volcanic eruption, seeing from the satellite, the magnitude, the size of this thing, and knowing that our little island of Tonga is sitting right in the middle of that, it's pretty tough. And obviously it must be tough for everyone in Tonga, but we haven't had any communication with anyone over there. I believe the submarine communication cable has been severed.
And Peter, I understand you are spearheading a campaign now to help Tonga get back on its feet, to get these people found that are missing. How resilient are Tongans?
They don't come any more resilient than Tongans. We've been through 1,000 different things over 1,000 different years, and we're still here, we're still standing, we're still that little island, a group of islands in the middle of the Pacific with our little kingdom. Yeah, so we're very resilient. At the moment, it's quite hard to actually get a full gauge on the damage, and that's whether it's life or injury or infrastructure or both, just because of the communication. But I guess we will find out soon once communication gets brought back.
Yeah, well, Peter Toffa-Tafua, thank you so much for coming on to chat to us this evening, and we're all really hoping that it all ends very well for you, and we'll get an update in the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. All right, and that is all for today on Global Eye, but feel free to catch up on the show on Facebook or i24news.tv. We will, of course, be seeing you again tomorrow, but for now, good night.